Hi, everybody. Let's talk about Chapter 8, Falling in Love or Like Online. To start off, I want you to think about when you're building a relationship with somebody. Um, if you think it's better to talk to them online or talking to them offline. This relates to the discussion question for this chapter. One important aspect to relational communication is haptic communication. And haptic communication has to do with touch. So, how important is touch to a relationship? Does it depend on the type of relationship? How do you define relationship? Most people tend, when I ask, is touch important in every relationship? They say yes, but they're thinking of relationships in as a small portion of them as romantic relationships or familial relationships. So you need to think beyond that. What about professional relationships? Would it would you expect touch if you came into my office and you were upset, you were having some trauma in your life and you were coming to talk to me about it because it's affecting your work? Would you expect me to hug you? And if not, and I hugged you, that would violate your expectations, or vice versa. So, some of this, how important touch is to you is a very personal thing, and it depends on your expectations. Not all relationships are intimate, and the importance of haptic communication really depends on your expectations rather than technology. And there are ways that you can touch online. There is technology being created. It's not just something in Big Bang Theory. If you watch that show, I have the video in my online lecture of the kissing machine that Wolowitz created and was demonstrating for Leonard when he was dating Priya in a long-distance relationship. One of the earliest studies on touch was by Harry Harlow, and it's called the Monkey Experiments. And I have a link to a video for that in my online lectures if you'd like to watch that as well. For the most part, people tend to organize their social networks by homophily, and homophily is similarity. So you tend to gravitate towards people that you see as similar to you. Similar interests. It could have to do with basic demographics of age, race, gender, but it can also, homophily can also be an interest. So if you like to skateboard, you want friends that like to skateboard. However, networks with high levels of homophily might not be the most effective, because then you run the risk of always thinking alike, which can be dangerous because if you need to make important decisions. Diverse networks allow for bridging between unique people with unique knowledge and interests. Social networking isn't something new. It's just something that's a little more obvious with social networking online. Technology didn't create the concept, but it did speed it up. You can think of the internet social networking by considering each network person as a node in a larger social network, and you are tied to one another. Each node is tied to one another, and some of those ties are stronger than others. Social networks can be organized in a number of ways, such as a bucket brigade, which if you think of, if you had to put out a fire using buckets, where the bucket gets passed from one person to the next in a straight line. That's a bucket brigade. Telephone trees is where each person is linked one way to several others who are similarly linked. So maybe a chain mail. This was something that was done. I know my parents were part of phone trees when I was growing up. So if something happened at school, one parent was in charge of calling 5 other parents, and then each of those parents were assigned so many other parents to call, so it went down the line to make sure that everyone received that phone call. And both of these have their problems. They're not perfect. Christakis and Fowler in 2009 proposed that the rules of social networks Number one, we shape our networks. So we determine who is in our network, and then our networks help shape us. So there's influence in what other people post. Our friends affect us. Our friends' friends can affect us. And networks do have a life of their own. Just because we're connected to somebody does not necessarily mean we are influenced by them. I don't know how many of you have heard the term 6 degrees of separation, but in social networks, studies have found that there's actually 3 degrees of separation. So your friend's friend can influence you. So I have a video link in the lecture slides that you can listen to about that and how that influence works. But basically, if you are on a diet, you can influence your friend, but you can also influence your friend's friend. So it's that 3 degrees, so 3 people out. How can we be close to people that we can't see or touch, such as those online? Media richness theory argues that different technologies differ in terms of the cues from communication they provide, and more equivocal information requires more cues. Cues are required for relational communication. So think about the different forms of technology that you could use to build closeness with someone. Some are richer than others. So watching this video is richer than if I typed out everything that I had to say, or if I just posted the lecture slides and said, here you go, figure it out. And you just read the text, because you can hear what I have to say, see me talking, see my nonverbals. You can get a better idea of what's important. Media richness theory claims that different communication channels can be cue lean or cue rich as a function of bandwidth, immediacy of feedback, message personalization, and natural language. So handwriting a letter is going to be cue lean as opposed to a phone call. And a phone call might be more lean than video chat, because now with video chat, you can see nonverbals along with hearing the voice, where with the phone call, you can only hear the voice inflections. Media richness theory argues that more cues lead to more intimate communication. But note, people's communication goals don't automatically change as a function of the channel used. It's still a matter of what's your goal. It doesn't matter what form of media you use. The goals don't change. Make sure you understand social information processing theory. And that has to do with strategic online communication. So you use chromatics and emoticons. Emoticons are a substitute for nonverbal communication in an online setting. Social information processing theory argues that we can think of a drink straw as an example for communication via technology. What that means is, with face-to-face, we tend to gulp lots of information at one time. But with CMC, we tend to sip a little bit of information over a longer period of time. In both cases, we do eventually get all the information we want. It's just sometimes with CMC, it takes a little bit longer. That's why they say to build a relationship online, it takes time. Some research has found that social interactions online to be more intense than offline, and that's called a hyperpersonal relationship. So senders use a lack of nonverbal cues to better frame themselves. The receivers idealize senders based on these idealized self-presentations. CMC allows for greater message control, so you can craft your messages more carefully than you could if you're in a conversation. And confirmatory feedback results in both parties performing as expected by the others. So expectations are greater. This is why catfishing can happen, that hyper-personal relationship, because you idealize the other person a little more than in person because of the nature of the communication. So make sure that you understand media richness theory, social information processing theory, the importance of touch, and how networks work. That's it for Chapter 8, and I'll see you all soon.